All right, folks, the G20 was held in Brazil this year, and that was very fortunate timing because the U.S. isolated at G20 as Gaza crisis worsens, this reported by the Washington Post. The U.S. opposition to an immediate ceasefire in Gaza came under repeated criticism during a two-day meeting of the chief diplomats of the world's 20 largest economies in the latest sign of Washington's isolation on the issue. Brazilian Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira, the host of this year's annual Group of 20 gathering, began the meeting by decrying the paralysis at the United Nations Security Council, where Washington vetoed a third resolution for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza earlier in the week. So the paralysis, of course, we know, is the fault of the United States and the United States alone, since the United States cast the lone no vote, with Britain, our good little lapdogs, voting present. They didn't even join us in the vote. They just voted present to try and stay as much on our good side as they can. Quote, "This state of inaction results in the loss of innocent lives," Vieira said. The top diplomats at the gathering, which included Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, offered their views on various geopolitical issues in a session that was closed to the media so officials could express themselves more candidly. Oh, again, democracy, folks. Democracy in action. But this meeting had the opposite problem that the Day X hearings had. By mistake, a small group of journalists, including from the Washington Post, were able to listen in on the session because the audio headsets continued broadcasting the remarks unbeknownst to the Brazilian host. So at the Assange Day X hearings, the audio cut out, so the journalists couldn't observe what was going on. At the G20, the audio stayed on past when it was supposed to, and the Washington Post was able to do this write-up based on words they weren't supposed to hear. Australia, a close ally of the United States, supported an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and strongly warned about the further devastation that could result from Israel's announced military campaign in the southern city of Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced Palestinians have sought shelter. "We say again to Israel, do not go down this path," said Australia's representative Katie Gallagher. "This would be unjustifiable." South Africa, which has accused Israel of carrying out a genocide in Gaza, a charge Israel strenuously denies, said world leaders have, quote, allowed impunity to hold sway. "We have failed the people of Palestine," said Naledi Pandor, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. The accidentally broadcast remarks created a sharp contrast with the G20 gathering last year in India, where Blinken sought to unite world powers in condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At the time, Blinken found a more receptive audience when he invoked the United Nations Charter and the principles of sovereignty to criticize Moscow's land grab. But in Brazil, diplomats invoked those same principles to criticize the ongoing war in Gaza, which is, that's a land grab if ever I've seen one, for which the United States has provided Israel political cover and billions of dollars worth of bombs and military equipment. Final slide. If, for example, we had been united behind the principles set out in the UN Charter, said South Africa's representative, the tragedy in Palestine will not have lasted over 3 months. Blinken told reporters on Thursday that despite strong disagreements on an immediate ceasefire, he viewed the G20 as largely united when it comes to goals in the conflict. Oh, sure. Sounds like that, doesn't it? Everyone supports trying to reach a hostage agreement. Everyone supports having an extended humanitarian ceasefire. Everyone supports finding a way to end the conflict, he said. There may be differences over tactics. Oh, tactics. Is that what you call carpet bombing 2 million people at once? Is that what you call murdering over 12,000 children? But we're trying to focus on actually getting results, Blinken added. All right, before I go to your take, Russell, on the substance of the piece, I just have to say, it sounds like these reporters here, what's the byline there? John Hudson? Sounds like he's publishing information that he wasn't supposed to have access to because those audio sets stayed on. Sounds like there's a spot in Belmarsh prison that, should be waiting for him now. I mean, if we're going to be consistent, right? I mean, isn't that a crime? Shouldn't he be thrown into solitary confinement? Shouldn't he be treated that way? I mean, he's printing information he's not supposed to have, is he not?
Yeah, and I'll point out that Julian's treatment has been so poor in Belmarsh, he was not able to attend the trial.
Right.
And knowing Julian, certainly what we know of him, his condition would have to be pretty severe. So we believe in justice. We believe in human rights. He's a relatively young man, so clearly he's being abused. He's being tortured. If he could not physically be in a courtroom for that hearing,
For a life and death hearing. Like, if
for a
there's any
life and
place
death
he'd want to
hearing,
be, it's there.
of course, even to see his wife, right, the mother of his
Right.
children. The fact that he couldn't do that, that is de facto evidence that the man is being treated with what we would call cruel and unusual punishment. It was just one of those great ironies that Navalny, who will be careful, we saw what happened with INN over there.
Yes, shout out to INN.
Shout
But,
out to
we do have
shout
to
out to
remind everybody that, Navalny's safe and effective.
Navalny is very safe and effective, particularly in regards to the Muslim community, or at least he wanted to have a safe and effective solution. You can go back and watch his campaign ad to see what that solution was for Navalny, who
Yes,
was
and I happen to believe that Rattle and Hum is one of the most underrated live albums of all time, too. I'll say that as well.
absolutely Bono,
Amazing.
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 But at the same exact time, we're invoking some kind of moral authority in regards to freedom of speech and political dissent, literally the same exact time that Julian Assange is having his hearing. If that does not expose the core just collapse in any pretense at moral superiority the West has, what more could we do to undermine it? And this is what you hear very often from countries that are outside of our direct control. For decades. I mean, you've always had, for everyone from Castro on, always pointed out this core hypocrisy that the West has: do as we say, not as we do.
Of course.
We're,
And I would also say, with regards to what the reporters actually overheard, you see a United States not only isolate itself in front of the cameras at the UN, raising their hands to veto the ceasefire resolution, but now isolating themselves behind the scenes when no one is supposed to hear them. This is, in the long run, going to be terrible for the state of Israel. They are going to be a pariah on the world stage, and so are we. So are we. Don't forget the cumulative GDP of the BRICS countries is now greater than that of the G7 countries. And so who really holds the cards here? And how much longer can we afford to isolate ourselves in this way? How much longer can that go on? Because the momentum is clearly going one way the wrong way from our point of view, which I actually personally feel is the right way, right? A reckoning is long overdue for this country and the horrors that we have inflicted on the world, and it is coming. It's coming. It's not going to come militarily, but it's going to come diplomatically and eventually, yes, economically.
And economically.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, we covered. It's a blur. I don't know if we did it on this show or on the Jimmy Show about de-dollarization, and countries are increasingly cutting down on their dollar reserves. This is a country that, it's always been dismissed as a conservative talking point, and fair enough, because they like to talk about the deficit never in terms of the Pentagon, only in terms of cutting social spending and social programs. But the core thesis that we can't just continue to run on this kind of debt is correct. especially the only reason we're able to get away with it is because we're the world's reserve currency and people keep buying our bonds as safe. Those factors go away, the entire economy is going to completely collapse. And don't give me that MMT shit. I'm sorry. They fucking stopped buying U.S. treasuries and our currency stops being in demand. And this move towards not pricing oil in dollars gains momentum. We are fucked, man. We are completely fucked. This economy, you can't run an economy on influencers.
Yeah, indeed. Well said. Well said. That's a good one. I think we should title the podcast, "You Can't Run an Economy on Influencers." You should write a book. That should be a good title for a book. You can't run an economy on influencers.
Well, I was going to say, man, we should write a book jointly. Maybe that'll be the title.
Yeah, that could be the title. That's good. I like that.
Please clap.